Imagine this, you're a happily married woman, 6 months pregnant with your second child, living the dream in a luxurious Seattle home with your millionaire husband and adorable daughter. Life seems perfect until one afternoon. You overhear a phone call that shatters everything. Your best friend since college, the maid of honor at your wedding, is not only sleeping with your husband but carrying his child too. And that's just the beginning. What follows is a nightmare of betrayal, lies, legal battles, social media scandals, and a fight for your children's lives that will leave you questioning everything. From secret affairs and hidden pregnancies to forged evidence and federal takedowns, this story has more twists than a thriller movie. Will the betrayed wife lose it all or rise like a phoenix stick around? I promise you won't believe how it ends. If you're as hooked as I am, smash that like button, drop a comment with your wildest guess on the final twist, share this with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping, true-inspired tales. Let's dive in. Sarah Montgomery sat in the sterile ultrasound room, her hand resting protectively over her 6-month pregnant belly. The gel felt cold against her skin, but nothing could dampen the warmth spreading through her chest as she watched her unborn son's tiny heart beating steadily on the monitor. Everything looks perfect. Mrs. Montgomery, Dr. Martinez smiled, handing her several printed ultrasound images. Your baby boy is developing beautifully. Have you and your husband decided on a name yet? We're thinking Noah, Sarah beamed, carefully tucking the precious photos into her designer handbag. David will be so excited to see these. He's been working such long hours lately, but he never misses asking about the baby. As she walked to her silver BMW in the medical center parking lot, Sarah pulled out her phone to text David. The afternoon sun caught her wedding ring, the 3-carat diamond sparkling as she typed, Noah's doing great, heart rate perfect. Can't wait to show you the pictures tonight. Love you? She waited for his usual immediate response, but her phone remained silent. David Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Tech Solutions, was known for answering her messages within minutes, no matter how busy his schedule. Sarah glanced at the time, 3:30 in the afternoon. His calendar had been clear for the day. She remembered. A sudden impulse struck her. Why not surprise him at the office? She could show him Noah's photos in person, maybe convince him to take the afternoon off for a romantic dinner. After 12 years of marriage, these spontaneous moments had become rare, especially with 8-year-old Emma's soccer practices and school events filling their evenings. The drive to David's downtown Seattle office took 25 minutes through typical afternoon traffic. Sarah hummed along to the radio, occasionally glancing at the ultrasound photos on her passenger seat. Life felt perfect. A thriving marriage to a successful millionaire husband, a beautiful daughter, and now their second child on the way. Montgomery Tech Solutions occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming 40-story building in the heart of the financial district. Sarah rode the private elevator to the executive floor, nodding to David's secretary, Mrs. Chen, who seemed surprised to see her. Oh, Mrs. Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery is in his office, but he's on an important call. Should I let him know you're here? No need, Sarah smiled, holding up the ultrasound photos. I'll just peek in quietly. Good news about the baby. Mrs. Chen's expression flickered with something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Concern, nervousness. But before she could analyze it further, Sarah was already walking toward David's corner office, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The door was slightly ajar. She could hear David's voice, low and intimate in a way that made her pause. He wasn't using his business tone. Jessica, I can't keep doing this to Sarah, she heard him say. But I can't stop thinking about you either. When I'm with her, I'm thinking about you. When I'm with you, I feel guilty about her. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Jessica, as in Jessica Winters, her best friend since college, the same Jessica who had been the maid of honor at their wedding, who came to their house for dinner every Sunday, who helped plan Emma's birthday parties. She's 6 months pregnant. David, came Jessica's familiar voice through the speakerphone. "This complicates everything we've talked about. When are you going to tell her about us?" "After the baby comes," David replied. "I can't put that stress on her right now. The doctor said her blood pressure is already elevated. But Jess, I need to see you tonight. Can you meet me at our usual place?" Sarah's world tilted. The ultrasound photos slipped from her trembling fingers, scattering across the polished floor like fallen leaves. One image landed face up, showing Noah's tiny profile, his thumb near his mouth in peaceful innocence. The sound of the photos hitting the floor seemed to echo through the hallway. Sarah quickly knelt to gather them, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. Her hands shook as she tried to process what she'd just heard. Her husband, her best friend, an affair. The office door suddenly opened wider, and David appeared, his phone still in his hand. His face went pale when he saw Sarah crouched on the floor, frantically collecting the ultrasound images. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" His voice was an octave higher than usual. She stood slowly, clutching the photos to her chest like armor. "I wanted to surprise you with these," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Pictures of our son." David's eyes darted between her face and the photos, his expression cycling through shock, guilt, and something that looked almost like annoyance. "Honey, you should have called first. I'm in the middle of important business negotiations." "Business negotiations," Sarah repeated, finding her voice. "Is that what you call it when you're planning secret meetings with Jessica?" The color drained completely from David's face. Behind him, Sarah could see Mrs. Chen pretending to be busy at her desk, but her ears were clearly tuned to every word. "Sarah, you don't understand what you heard. Jessica and I are business partners now. She joined the company 6 months ago as vice president of marketing. We were discussing a difficult client situation." But Sarah had heard the intimacy in his voice, the longing when he said Jessica's name. This wasn't business. This was something much deeper, much more devastating. "I need to go," she managed, backing toward the elevator. "Emma gets out of school in an hour." "Sarah, wait, let me explain." But she was already gone, jabbing the elevator button with desperate urgency. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of David standing in his office doorway, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of guilt and frustration. The elevator descent felt endless. Sarah stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors, seeing a stranger looking back, a pregnant woman with smeared mascara and the beginning of crow's feet around her eyes. When had she started looking so tired, so old in the parking garage? She sat in her car for 10 minutes, sobbing until her chest ached. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began, fat droplets hitting her windshield in a rhythm that matched her racing heart. She called her sister Maya, a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. "Maya, I think David is cheating on me." The words tumbled out between sobs. "With Jessica." "What, Sarah? Slow down. What happened?" Through broken sentences, Sarah explained what she'd overheard. Maya listened without interruption, her breathing growing heavier with each detail. "That son of a bitch," Maya finally said. "And with Jessica, after everything you've done for that woman, Sarah, you remember what happened on The Good Wife? Right, Alicia should have left Peter the first time, not wasted years trying to save a marriage to a man who didn't respect her." Sarah had always loved that show, but she criticized Alicia's choices, wondering how any woman could stay with a cheating husband. Now she understood the paralysis, the desperate hope that maybe it wasn't what it seemed. "What do I do?" "Maya, I'm 6 months pregnant. Emma's in second grade. Our whole life is built around David's success. Right now, you go home and take care of yourself and that baby. Don't confront him tonight when you're this upset. But Sarah, you need to know the truth. And if what you heard is real, you need to protect yourself financially. Men like David don't cheat without having an exit strategy." After ending the call, Sarah sat in the parking garage until her breathing steadied. She had to pick up Emma from school, had to pretend everything was normal for a few more hours while she figured out how to handle this. But first, She needed to know the truth, and that meant confronting Jessica. The drive to Jessica's luxury apartment building in Belltown felt surreal. Sarah had been there dozens of times for wine nights and girls' weekends. Jessica lived in a converted warehouse that had been transformed into million-dollar lofts, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Sarah had always been slightly envious of Jessica's independence, her freedom to travel and date and focus solely on her career. Now she wondered if that freedom had included the freedom to seduce married men. The doorman recognized her and waved her through without calling upstairs. Sarah rode the elevator to the 15th floor, her heart pounding harder with each floor that passed. She knocked on Jessica's door, trying to formulate what she would say. How do you ask your best friend if she's sleeping with your husband? The door opened, and Sarah's world collapsed. Jessica stood there in a silk robe, her dark hair tousled, her face flushed. But what stopped Sarah's heart wasn't Jessica's obvious post-intimate appearance. It was her belly. Jessica was pregnant, visibly, undeniably pregnant. And from the size of her bump, she was further along than Sarah. Sarah, Jessica's face went white. What are you doing here? I thought you had a doctor's appointment today. I did, Sarah whispered, staring at Jessica's rounded stomach. When were you going to tell me? Jessica's hand moved instinctively to her belly, a protective gesture Sarah recognized all too well. It's complicated. How complicated can it be? You're pregnant, and I'm your best friend. Or at least, I thought I was. Sarah's voice was getting stronger, fueled by a growing rage that surprised her with its intensity. Jessica stepped back, allowing Sarah into the apartment. The living room was exactly as Sarah remembered. Minimalist furniture, expensive art, everything pristine and perfect. But now it felt like a stage set, a carefully constructed facade hiding devastating secrets. Sarah, sit down, please. Let me explain. Explain what? Explain how my best friend forgot to mention she was having a baby. Explain why my husband was just on the phone with you, talking about secret meetings and how he can't stop thinking about you. Jessica's composure cracked. She sank into her white leather sofa, her hand still protectively covering her bump. You overheard that. Answer me, Jessica. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside, the rain was coming down harder, the sound of it against the large windows filling the space where honesty should have been. Finally, Jessica raised her chin with a defiance that Sarah had never seen before. 18 months. 18 months. Sarah's brain struggled to process the timeline. 18 months ago, she'd been trying to convince David to have another baby. She'd been planning surprise romantic getaways, cooking his favorite meals, doing everything she could to reconnect with the man she'd married. And he'd been falling in love with someone else. And the baby, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, is David's. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She doubled over, gasping for air as the full scope of the betrayal washed over her. Not only had her husband been cheating, not only had her best friend been lying to her for over a year, but they'd created a life together, a child that would forever bind them in a way that made Sarah feel utterly disposable. Sarah, breathe. Think about your baby. Don't, Sarah snapped, straightening up with effort. Don't you dare pretend to care about my baby when you've been planning to destroy his family for 18 months. Jessica stood up, her pregnancy making her movements careful and deliberate. She walked to her kitchen island where an expensive handbag sat open. From it, she pulled out a small jewelry box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring that made Sarah's engagement ring look modest. He bought this for me last month, Jessica said quietly. He's going to propose officially after your baby is born, and you've had time to adjust to being a single mother. Sarah stared at the ring, her mind reeling. He's already married, Jessica. To me. Not for much longer. Jessica's voice had taken on a cold edge that Sarah had never heard before. David isn't happy. Sarah. He hasn't been for years. He stays because he feels obligated, because of Emma and now this new baby. But he loves me. If he loves you so much, why hasn't he left me already? Jessica smiled, and it was a cruel expression that transformed her familiar features into something predatory. Because I told him not to. A man who abandons his pregnant wife looks terrible in divorce court, but a man whose wife discovers his affair and chooses to leave, that's different. That makes him look like the victim. The calculation behind it all hit Sarah like ice water. This wasn't a crime of passion, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy her marriage and steal her life. "You've been planning this," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "The whole time, every Sunday dinner at our house, every birthday party, every time you held Emma and told her how lucky she was to have such a wonderful family, you were planning to destroy it all." "I was planning to make David happy," Jessica corrected. "Something you obviously can't do anymore." Sarah looked around the apartment with new eyes. The expensive furniture, the designer clothes hanging in the open closet, the luxury car keys on the counter next to the latest iPhone. "He's been paying for all this, hasn't he? The apartment, the clothes, the car. My husband has been funding your life while I clip coupons and worry about Emma's college fund." Jessica didn't deny it. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a series of text messages. Sarah recognized David's number immediately. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Sarah has book club, so I'll be there by 8. Booked us a table at Le Bernardin for tomorrow. Tell Sarah you're having dinner with your mother. The lawyer says we need to wait 6 more months after the baby comes. I know it's hard, but soon we'll be together openly." Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed onto Jessica's marble floor, the cold stone shocking her system as her pregnant body struggled to process the emotional trauma. Every text message was a dagger. Every casual deception, a betrayal that cut deeper than she thought possible. From this angle, she could see under Jessica's couch where a man's sock had been forgotten. A sock she recognized because she'd given David the matching set for Christmas. "Sarah, get up. You're being dramatic." But Sarah couldn't move. The weight of the betrayal, the scope of the lies, the calculated cruelty of it all had paralyzed her. She thought about every evening David had come home late, every business trip he'd taken, every time Jessica had called with some crisis that needed immediate attention. How long had they been laughing at her? How many times had they made love and then discussed how naive, how trusting, how pathetic Sarah was? She thought about the self-help books on her nightstand, particularly Eat, Pray, Love. She'd read it twice, secretly wondering if she was missing something by being so devoted to her family. Elizabeth Gilbert had chosen herself, had walked away from a comfortable but unfulfilling life to find her true happiness. But Elizabeth Gilbert hadn't been 6 months pregnant. She hadn't had an 8-year-old daughter who adored her father. Sarah's phone rang, David's ringtone. Jessica gestured for her to answer it. "He's probably wondering where you are," Jessica said with false sympathy. "You should go home. Emma needs to be picked up from school." Emma, sweet, trusting Emma, who still believed her parents had the perfect marriage. Emma, who called Jessica Aunt Jess and begged for sleepovers at her apartment. With effort, Sarah pushed herself up from the floor. Her body ached, and she could feel stress radiating through her belly. The baby, Noah, moved restlessly, as if sensing his mother's distress. "This isn't over," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Yes, it is," Jessica replied, her hand moving to her larger belly in a gesture that was clearly meant to remind Sarah who was winning this war. "David has already made his choice. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone, especially Emma." Sarah left the apartment in a daze, Jessica's words echoing in her mind. In the elevator, she caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls, disheveled hair, smeared makeup, her maternity dress wrinkled from sitting on the floor. She looked exactly like what she was, a discarded wife, a woman whose husband had found someone younger, more exciting, more desirable. The drive home was a blur of rain and traffic lights. Sarah's phone continued to ring. David calling, probably wondering why she wasn't answering. Each ring felt like an accusation, A reminder that she was supposed to be the perfect wife who never questioned, never suspected, never caused problems. She pulled into their driveway at exactly the same time as the school bus. Emma bounced down the steps, her backpack nearly as big as she was, her face lighting up when she saw her mother's car. "Mommy, did you get pictures of my baby brother today?" Sarah managed a smile as Emma climbed into the car, chattering about her day at school. As they drove back to their house, the house David had bought with money he was now spending on another woman, Sarah made a decision. She would go home, she would make dinner, she would help Emma with her homework and give her a bath and read her a bedtime story. She would pretend, for one more night, that her world hadn't just shattered into a million pieces. But tomorrow she would find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. And then she would decide what to do about it. Because despite what Jessica thought, despite what David apparently believed, Sarah Montgomery was not going to disappear quietly into the background of their love story. She was going to fight. Sarah managed to keep up appearances through dinner, helping Emma with her math homework while David pushed food around his plate and checked his phone constantly. Every notification made Sarah's heart race, wondering if Jessica was texting him, planning their evening together. "Daddy, you're not listening," Emma complained, tugging on David's sleeve. "I asked you 3 times if you'll come to my soccer game on Saturday." David looked up, startled. "Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it." But Sarah noticed he immediately typed something into his phone, probably telling Jessica he'd be delayed on Saturday. The casual way he lied to their daughter made Sarah's stomach turn. That night, David announced he had to return to the office for an emergency client call with Tokyo. The time difference, he explained, made it necessary to take the call at 10 p.m. Sarah nodded and smiled, playing her role perfectly while inside she burned with the knowledge of where he was really going. After he left, she sat in their king-sized bed, the bed where they'd conceived Noah, where they'd whispered dreams about their growing family, and tried to formulate a plan. She'd spent most of the afternoon replaying every conversation with Jessica over the past 18 months, looking for clues she'd missed, the new designer handbags Jessica couldn't quite explain, the sudden career change to marketing after years in nonprofit work, the way she'd started asking detailed questions about David's schedule, his business trips, his state of mind. Sarah had thought Jessica was being a caring friend. Instead, she'd been gathering intelligence. Sleep was impossible. Every time Sarah closed her eyes, she saw Jessica's pregnant belly, heard David's voice saying he couldn't stop thinking about another woman. When David finally came home at 2 a.m., smelling like unfamiliar perfume, Sarah pretended to be asleep. The next morning, after David left for work and Emma for school, Sarah made a decision that surprised her with its boldness. She was going back to Jessica's apartment, but this time she was prepared. She'd spent the sleepless hours researching Washington state divorce laws on her phone, community property state, marital assets split 50-50, but prenups could change everything. And Sarah dimly remembered signing something before their wedding that David's lawyer had assured her was just a formality. She needed to see that prenup. She needed to understand exactly what she'd signed away in her trusting youth. But first, she needed the whole truth from Jessica. This time, Sarah called ahead. "Jessica, it's me. We need to talk." "Sarah, I told you everything yesterday. There's nothing more to discuss?" "Actually, there is. I have some questions about your pregnancy timeline and about David's business trips to Portland last spring." The silence on the other end told Sarah everything. David had told her those trips were for client meetings. But Portland was where Jessica's mother lived, where Jessica had been going for mysterious family emergencies that always seemed to coincide with David's travel schedule. "I'll be over in 20 minutes, Sarah said, and hung up before Jessica could object. This time, when Jessica opened her apartment door, she was fully dressed in an expensive maternity outfit that probably cost more than Sarah spent on clothes in 6 months. But she looked nervous, her usual confidence shaken. "Sarah, I really think we've said everything we need to say." "Have we?" Sarah walked past her into the apartment, noticing details she'd missed in yesterday's emotional haze. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, champagne glasses in the sink, a men's watch on the coffee table that definitely wasn't there during her previous visits. "Nice watch," Sarah commented, picking up the Rolex. "I gave David one just like it for our anniversary last year." Jessica's face flushed. "He forgot it here yesterday. After you left, he came over to explain what happened." "To explain or to coordinate your stories." Sarah set down the watch and turned to face Jessica directly. In the harsh morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, her former best friend looked different, harder. The gentle, supportive woman Sarah had confided in for years was gone, replaced by someone calculating and cold. "How far along are you?" "Jessica." "Really?" "I told you, it's complicated." "No, it's math. Simple math. You're showing more than I am. And I'm 6 months, which means you got pregnant before I did, which means David was already cheating when I told him I wanted another baby." Jessica moved to her kitchen island, putting distance between them. "Sarah, dwelling on timelines isn't going to change anything." "It changes everything." Sarah's voice rose, surprising them both. "It means that every conversation we had about me wanting another baby, every time I cried to you because David seemed distant, every time you consoled me and told me marriages go through rough patches, you knew exactly why he was distant. Because he was with you." The mask finally slipped completely from Jessica's face. Gone was any pretense of friendship or sympathy. In its place was something that looked almost like satisfaction. "You want the truth. Sarah, fine. David came to me. He was miserable in your marriage, bored with your suburban housewife routine. When you told him you wanted another baby, he panicked. He said he felt trapped, suffocated by the perfect little life you'd built that made him feel dead inside." Each word was a calculated strike, designed to hurt as much as possible. Sarah felt them like physical blows, but she forced herself to stand straighter, to not give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing her crumble again. "So you decided to help him feel alive again." "I decided to show him what real passion looked like, what it felt like to be with a woman who wanted him, not just his paycheck and his presence at school plays." "And you got pregnant on purpose." It wasn't a question. Sarah could see the truth in Jessica's defiant expression. "Insurance," Jessica said simply. "David talks about leaving, but he's weak. He feels guilty about Emma, about disrupting her perfect little world. But a man will always choose the mother of his children, especially when that mother isn't clinging and desperate like you've become." Sarah walked to Jessica's refrigerator, where dozens of photos were held by expensive magnets. Pictures of David and Jessica at restaurants, on weekend trips, in intimate moments that looked like a relationship, not an affair. In every photo, they looked happy, relaxed, in love. There were no pictures of Sarah. "How long have you been in love with him?" Sarah asked quietly. "Since your wedding day." The admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. She remembered Jessica's maid of honor speech, how beautiful and heartfelt it had been, how Jessica had talked about the love between Sarah and David being inspiring, something to aspire to. "You stood up at our wedding and made a toast about true love while you were planning to steal my husband. I made a toast about a love I wanted for myself. I never planned for David to feel the same way about me. But when he did..." Jessica shrugged. "I wasn't going to let convention stop me from being happy." Sarah turned away from the photos, unable to look at David's face beaming at another woman while she'd been home, pregnant and trusting, planning their future together. "Show me the texts," she said. "What?" "You showed me some yesterday. I want to see all of them. I want to see exactly how you've been planning to destroy my family." Jessica hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Why torture yourself?" "Because I need to know how stupid I've been." Jessica handed over the phone, and Sarah began scrolling through months of messages. What she found was worse than she'd imagined. It wasn't just an affair. It was a complete alternate life. Messages about house hunting in Vancouver, where they planned to move after the divorce. discussions about Emma's custody schedule and how to minimize Sarah's influence, plans for their new baby's nursery, complete with photos of expensive furniture and designer decorations. But the messages that hurt most were the casual cruelties. Sarah seems suspicious today. I think she's gaining weight from stress eating. She asked me why I've been so distant lately. I told her she's being paranoid because of pregnancy hormones. Sometimes I feel bad about Emma. She really loves her mom, but she'll adjust. Sarah's hands shook as she read David's casual dismissal of their daughter's feelings, his cold analysis of Sarah's emotional state. This wasn't the man she'd married, the father who cried when Emma took her first steps. Or maybe it was, and she'd never really known him at all. "There's more," Jessica said quietly. "Things you should probably know before David gets home tonight." She took the phone back and scrolled to a different conversation thread. This one was between Jessica and someone named Marcus Chen, David's business partner and CFO. "Jesus, Jessica, this is financial fraud," Sarah whispered, reading messages about transferred funds, offshore accounts, and protecting assets from potential divorce settlements. "David's been planning this for months. Sarah, the company restructuring, the new corporate accounts, even the timing of your pregnancy, it's all been carefully orchestrated to minimize what you'll be entitled to in the divorce." Sarah felt the room spinning. She gripped the edge of Jessica's marble countertop, fighting a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "The prenup," she managed. "Where's the prenup I signed?" Jessica opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "David asked me to keep copies of important documents here, just in case." Sarah grabbed the folder with trembling hands. Inside was the prenuptial agreement she'd signed 12 years ago. Trusting and in love, and completely naive about protecting herself financially. She'd been 23, fresh out of college, overwhelmed by wedding planning, and completely confident that she and David would be together forever. Reading it now, she understood how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. The agreement heavily favored David, limiting her to a small monthly spousal support payment and a minimal share of their assets. Worse, it included a morality clause that voided even those protections if she was found to be at fault for the marriage's dissolution. "He's going to claim I had an affair," Sarah realized, understanding flooding through her. "That's why you've been setting me up, asking about Dr. Reynolds." Dr. Reynolds was Sarah's obstetrician, a kind older man who delivered Emma and was now caring for her during this pregnancy. Jessica had recently started making odd comments about how often Sarah saw him, how she seemed to light up when talking about her appointments. "David has photos of you hugging Dr. Reynolds after your last appointment," Jessica confirmed. "And there's that coffee you had with your college friend Michael when he was in town for business. David hired a private investigator 2 months ago. You'd be amazed what innocent interactions can look like with the right framing." Sarah's legs gave out. She slid down Jessica's kitchen cabinets until she was sitting on the cold marble floor, her pregnant belly making the position awkward and uncomfortable. But nothing was as uncomfortable as the realization that her entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. "Why are you telling me all this?" she whispered. "Why not let me find out in court?" Jessica knelt down beside her, and for a moment, her expression softened into something that almost resembled the friend Sarah used to know. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed completely. David's plan would leave you with nothing. Sarah, no money, minimal custody of the children, and a reputation as an unfaithful wife. I'm offering you a chance to walk away with some dignity intact." "What kind of chance?" "Agree to an uncontested divorce, accept a reasonable settlement that David's prepared to offer, more than the prenup requires, but less than you'd get in a bitter court battle you'd probably lose anyway. Keep this quiet. Don't try to destroy David's reputation or business, and you can start over somewhere else with enough money to build a decent life." Sarah stared at Jessica's perfectly manicured hands, the expensive engagement ring catching the light. "And in return, you disappear quietly. No drama, no media attention, no trying to poison Emma against her father or his new family. David gets to marry me without the scandal of abandoning a pregnant wife, and everyone moves forward. Everyone except me. You'll survive. Sarah, you're stronger than you think. And honestly, you'll probably be happier without David. You've been trying to force a square peg in a round hole for years. This gives you a chance to find someone who actually wants the life you're offering. The twisted logic of it made Sarah's head spin. Jessica was offering her a way out that would preserve everyone's reputation while destroying her life. She would lose her husband, her home, her financial security, and most of her time with her children, but she would do it gracefully. What if I say no? Jessica's expression hardened again. Then David proceeds with Plan A: contested divorce, morality clause enforcement, character assassination. You'll lose everything anyway, but you'll also be publicly humiliated in the process. And Emma will have to live through all of it: the media attention, the court battles, watching her parents destroy each other. Sarah thought about 8-year-old Emma, who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who trusted both her parents completely and had no idea her world was about to explode. I need time to think. You have until tonight. David's planning to talk to you after Emma goes to bed. He's hoping you'll be reasonable. Reasonable, as if agreeing to give up her life was a matter of being sensible rather than being systematically destroyed by the two people she trusted most. Sarah struggled to her feet, her body aching from the emotional and physical stress. At the apartment door, she turned back to Jessica one last time. Did you ever actually love me as a friend? I mean, Jessica considered the question seriously. I did, but I loved David more. And sometimes love makes us do terrible things to people we care about. Sarah left the apartment and rode the elevator down in silence. In the parking garage, she sat in her car for a long time, trying to process everything she'd learned. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Hope you're feeling better today. Love you. The casual cruelty of it made her laugh, a sound with no humor in it at all. She had 8 hours until David came home, expecting her to be reasonable. 8 hours to decide whether to accept her destruction gracefully or fight back against impossible odds. Sarah started her car and began driving toward home, her mind racing through possibilities. She thought about the women on The Good Wife, how Alicia had tried so hard to save her marriage to Peter despite his betrayals, how she'd compromised herself over and over again, hoping to preserve some version of the life she'd thought she had. But Sarah also thought about the women who fought back, who refused to accept other people's definitions of what they deserved. She was 6 months pregnant, financially dependent, and apparently about to be framed as an adulterous wife. But she wasn't broken yet. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Sarah had made her decision. She wasn't going to be reasonable. She was going to war. That evening, Sarah sat in their living room, watching David play chess with Emma while she pretended to read a pregnancy book. Every movement he made, every gentle word to their daughter, felt like another layer of betrayal. How could he compartmentalize so completely? How could he plan to destroy their family while helping Emma with her homework? Checkmate, Daddy! Emma squealed, clapping her hands as David's king fell. You're getting too good at this, sweetheart. David laughed, ruffling her hair. Pretty soon you'll be beating me at everything. Sarah watched this tender father-daughter moment and felt her heart breaking for Emma. In a few months, these peaceful evenings would be memories. Emma would become a child of divorce, shuttled between houses, forced to choose sides in a war she didn't understand. After Emma went to bed, David poured himself a scotch and settled onto the couch beside Sarah. She could smell Jessica's perfume faintly on his clothes, and it took all her self-control not to recoil from his touch. Sarah, we need to talk. Here it comes, she thought. The moment he would destroy everything while trying to make it sound reasonable. About what? She asked, keeping her voice steady. David set down his drink and turned to face her fully. In the lamplight, she could see the stress lines around his eyes, the guilt he was trying to hide behind his composed businessman facade. About us, about our marriage. I know things haven't been ideal lately. Define ideal, Sarah said quietly. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing. Now it just looked like performance, calculated to make him appear vulnerable and conflicted. Sarah, I've been unhappy for a long time. I've tried to hide it because of Emma, because of the baby coming, but I can't pretend anymore. We've grown apart. We want different things. What do you want? David, I want a partner, not just a wife. I want someone who challenges me intellectually, who shares my ambitions, who understands the demands of building something significant. Each word was clearly chosen to make Sarah feel inadequate. Not intellectual enough, not ambitious enough, not understanding enough. And you found this person. David's pause was infinitesimal, but Sarah caught it. I've realized what I need in a relationship, and I don't think we can give each other what we need anymore. So you want a divorce? I want us both to be happy. And Sarah, I don't think you're happy either. You've been going through the motions for years, trying to be the perfect wife and mother, but you've lost yourself in the process. Maybe this is a chance for both of us to find what we really want. The gaslighting was so smooth, so perfectly delivered, that Sarah almost found herself wondering if he was right. Had she lost herself? Had she been going through the motions? But then she remembered Jessica's apartment, the photos of David looking happier than he'd ever looked with her, the text messages planning their future while dismissing Emma's feelings. Where would I go? She asked. I haven't worked in 8 years. I'm 6 months pregnant. Emma's school is here, her friends, her whole life. We'll figure it out together. I'm not going to abandon you. Sarah, you're the mother of my children. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. There it was, the carrot to go with the stick Jessica had described. How taken care of? David pulled out a manila folder from his briefcase. I've had my lawyer draw up a preliminary agreement. It's generous. Sarah, more than the prenup requires. Sarah took the folder with steady hands, though her heart was pounding. Inside was a settlement offer that confirmed everything Jessica had told her. A modest monthly payment that would barely cover rent on a decent apartment. A small lump sum that might last 2 years if she was careful. Primary custody of the children remaining with David due to his financial stability, with Sarah getting them every other weekend and 1 evening per week. She would become a weekend mother to her own children. This is generous, she asked, looking up at David. His expression had hardened slightly, the mask of concern slipping. It's fair given the circumstances. What circumstances? Sarah, I know about your inappropriate relationship with Dr. Reynolds and the coffee dates with old college friends. I've been trying to ignore it, hoping it was just pregnancy hormones making you act out. But stop! Sarah's voice cut through his practiced speech. Just stop! David blinked, clearly not expecting her to interrupt his carefully rehearsed narrative. You've been planning this for months, Sarah continued, standing up despite her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. Moving money around, building a case against me, setting me up to look like the bad guy, all while I've been planning our son's nursery and thinking about our future together. Sarah, you're being paranoid. The stress of pregnancy. I saw Jessica today. The words hung in the air between them like an explosion. David's face went completely pale, then flushed red as the implication sank in. What did you see Jessica about? She told me everything. David, about the 18 months, about her pregnancy, about your plans to move to Vancouver, about the private investigator and the offshore accounts. Everything. David stood up abruptly, beginning to pace the length of their living room. Sarah could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how much damage had been done, what could still be salvaged. Jessica is unstable, he said finally. She's been having fantasies about us having a relationship. I've been trying to let her down gently because she's a business partner, but she's clearly taken my kindness for something more. The lie was so bold, so complete, that Sarah almost admired its audacity. She showed me the texts, David, months of them, and the photos, and the watch you left at her apartment yesterday. David stopped pacing. For a long moment, He stared at Sarah with an expression she'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, completely devoid of the warmth she'd thought was genuine love. "Well," he said finally, his voice taking on a businesslike tone that chilled her, "I guess we're past the point of doing this amicably." Were we ever going to do this amicably, or was that just another lie? David walked to the window, looking out at their perfectly manicured lawn, the three-car garage, the swing set he'd installed for Emma 2 summers ago. "I tried to make this easy for you. Sarah, Jessica convinced me to offer you more than you're legally entitled to let you keep some dignity in this process. But if you want to fight, we can fight." "What does that mean?" He turned back to her, and she saw a stranger wearing her husband's face. "It means I have documentation of your erratic behavior over the past few months, your emotional instability, your inappropriate relationships with other men. It means I have financial records showing your irresponsible spending habits. It means I have testimony from people who've witnessed your parenting failures." Each accusation hit her like a physical blow. What parenting failures? Emma's grades dropping this semester, her complaints to the school counselor about mommy being sad all the time, the incident last month when you forgot to pick her up from soccer practice because you were having an emotional breakdown in a parking lot. Sarah remembered that day. She'd been at the grocery store when a wave of pregnancy hormones had overwhelmed her, leaving her crying in her car for 20 minutes. She'd been 15 minutes late picking up Emma, who hadn't seemed to mind because she was happily playing with friends. But in David's version, it became evidence of her unfitness as a mother. "You're going to use Emma against me. I'm going to protect Emma from an unstable home environment. Sarah, you've been depressed for months. Anyone can see it. You've isolated yourself from friends. You've gained excessive weight. You're constantly emotional and irrational. That's not a safe environment for children." The systematic destruction of her character was breathtaking in its thoroughness. David had been building this case against her, while she'd been completely oblivious, trusting him with her emotional vulnerabilities that he'd been cataloging as evidence against her. And Jessica, what happens to her in this narrative? Jessica is a successful businesswoman who's offered to help provide stability for Emma and the new baby. "She understands the demands of my career in a way that you never could. Because she's fucking you." The crude words shocked them both. Sarah had never spoken to David that way, had always been the perfect, understanding wife even when she was frustrated or hurt. "That's exactly the kind of inappropriate language that shows your deteriorating mental state," David said coldly. "I'll be sure to mention it to my lawyer." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Every word she said, every emotion she displayed, was being weaponized against her. She was trapped in a system designed by her husband and his mistress to destroy her while making her look like the villain. "I want to see my own lawyer." "Of course, that's your right. But Sarah, think carefully about what you're doing. The settlement I'm offering now won't be available if this goes to court. And if we have to air all of this in public, think about what that will do to Emma. Think about what it will do to your reputation." There was the real threat. Not just financial destruction, but public humiliation. David was a respected businessman in Seattle. He had connections, influence, money to burn on the best legal representation. Sarah was a housewife who'd been out of the workforce for 8 years. "I need time to think." Take all the time you need, but understand that every day you delay is another day of legal fees, another day of stress for everyone involved, another day that Emma has to live with tension and uncertainty. Even his generosity was a weapon. Even giving her time to decide was framed as him being reasonable while she was being difficult. After David went upstairs, claiming he had work emails to catch up on, Sarah sat alone in their living room surrounded by the debris of her shattered life. Wedding photos smiled down at her from the mantelpiece, mocking her with memories of a love that had apparently been an illusion. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Maya. "How are you feeling today? Want to come over for dinner tomorrow?" Sarah stared at the message, realizing she was about to lose more than just her husband and her home. Maya lived in a different social circle, had her own busy life as a single nurse. If Sarah became the bitter, divorced ex-wife, Would their friendship survive the awkwardness? Would Emma's friends' parents still invite her to birthday parties if there was scandal attached to their family name? She thought about the women in her book club, the mothers from Emma's school, the neighbors who'd been friendly acquaintances for years. In David's version of events, she would become the unstable woman who'd driven away a good man with her mental health issues and inappropriate behavior. The isolation had already begun. She realized, over the past few months, as David had been documenting her erratic behavior, she'd been pulling away from social connections, partly because of pregnancy fatigue, partly because of a growing sense that something was wrong in her marriage, but mostly because David had been subtly discouraging her friendships. You don't need to go to book club this month, do you? You seem tired. Maybe skip Emma's school fundraiser this year. You've been so stressed lately. Why don't you stay home tonight? I'll handle the neighborhood barbecue. You should rest. Each suggestion had seemed caring at the time. Now she understood they were part of building a case that she was antisocial, depressed, unable to maintain normal relationships. Around midnight, she heard David on the phone in his office. Through the thin walls, she could make out his voice. She knows everything. We're going to have to accelerate the timeline. Sarah crept closer to the door, her pregnant belly making stealth difficult. No, don't worry about the money. It's already transferred. She can't touch the offshore accounts even if she finds out about them. The company restructuring is complete. Everything's protected. A pause. Jessica, calm down. Yes, it's messier than we planned, but the outcome will be the same. Trust me. Another pause. I love you too. This will all be over soon, and we can start our real life together. Sarah backed away from the door, her heart pounding. Even now, even after being caught, David was reassuring his mistress that everything would work out for them, that Sarah was just an obstacle to be managed and removed. She went upstairs to their bedroom and lay in the dark, listening to David's voice murmuring sweet reassurances to another woman in the house where they'd planned to raise their children together. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah felt something stronger than devastation. She felt rage. David thought he could destroy her systematically, take everything she'd worked to build, and move on with his new life while she scraped by as a weekend mother with a ruined reputation. He was wrong. Sarah Montgomery might have been naive and trusting, but she wasn't stupid, and she wasn't helpless. She was a college-educated woman who'd given up her career to support his ambitions. She was a mother who would fight for her children with everything she had, and now she was a woman with nothing left to lose. As David's voice continued downstairs, making promises to Jessica while their children slept, Sarah began to plan. If David wanted a war, she would give him one he'd never forget. The next morning brought the first public humiliation. Sarah's phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. with notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and the neighborhood app next door. Her hands shook as she opened the first message. Someone had posted a long, detailed account of David's affair discovery on the local mommy Facebook group, a private group with over 3,000 members from their affluent Seattle suburb. But the story wasn't told from Sarah's perspective. Ladies, I need to share something heartbreaking that happened to a friend of mine. The post began, her husband discovered she's been having an inappropriate relationship with her doctor and possibly other men. She's 6 months pregnant and acting completely unhinged. Yesterday, she showed up at her husband's business partner's apartment and physically threatened her, accusing her of seducing her husband. The poor business partner had to call security. This woman needs help, but she's refusing therapy and blaming everyone else for her problems. Has anyone dealt with a friend having a complete mental breakdown during pregnancy? I'm worried about her children. Sarah read the post 3 times, her breath coming in short gasps. It was Jessica's story, carefully crafted to make Sarah look delusional while positioning Jessica as the innocent victim. Already, the comments were pouring in. This sounds like prenatal depression. So sad. Some women become paranoid during pregnancy. She definitely needs professional help. I feel sorry for the husband, How do you handle a partner who's becoming abusive? Those poor children. Is there a way to report this to child services? Sarah screenshot the post and kept scrolling. There were more on Instagram, photos of her taken without her knowledge over the past few weeks. Pictures of her crying in her car outside Emma's school. Captioned, "When mental health issues aren't addressed." A photo of her having coffee with her old college friend Michael, with the caption, "Emotional affair spotted in downtown Seattle." Some women have no shame. The systematic destruction was breathtaking. Every vulnerable moment, every private struggle had been documented and weaponized against her. The comments on these posts were even crueler. "She looks unhinged in every photo. That poor man. Imagine being married to that level of instability. Someone should call Child Protective Services. Those kids aren't safe." Sarah's phone rang. "Maya." "Sarah, what the hell is happening? I'm getting messages from people asking if you're okay, saying you're having some kind of breakdown. What's going on?" Through tears, Sarah explained about the social media posts. Maya was silent for a long moment. "This is character assassination," Maya said finally. "Deliberate and coordinated. Sarah, you need to get off social media right now and call a lawyer immediately." "I can't afford a lawyer. David's frozen all our accounts except for my household expense card, and that barely covers groceries." "I'll lend you money." "Sarah, this is serious. They're destroying your reputation to build their court case. Every comment on these posts is potential testimony about your mental state." Sarah hung up and immediately deactivated her social media accounts, but she knew the damage was spreading beyond her control. In their connected community, social media was how information traveled. By noon, everyone in Emma's school, their neighborhood, David's business circles would have heard some version of the story. The doorbell rang at 10 a.m. Sarah opened it to find Detective Maria Santos from the Seattle Police Department. "Mrs. Montgomery, I need to ask you some questions about an incident yesterday involving Jessica Winters." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" "Ms. Winters filed a report claiming you came to her apartment and threatened her. She says you were emotionally unstable and mentioned harming yourself. She's concerned about your welfare and the welfare of your unborn child." The police report was another masterpiece of manipulation. Jessica had claimed Sarah arrived at her apartment in a state of obvious distress, made concerning statements about her mental state, and appeared to be experiencing a psychotic break. She'd expressed worry that Sarah might hurt herself or her baby, requesting a welfare check. Detective Santos was professional, but clearly believed she was dealing with a pregnant woman in crisis. "Mrs. Montgomery, Ms. Winters says you've been struggling with depression and paranoid thoughts about your husband. She's worried about you. Did she mention that she's been having an affair with my husband for 18 months and is pregnant with his child?" Detective Santos raised an eyebrow. "She mentioned you've been having delusions about an affair that doesn't exist." "Mrs. Montgomery, when's the last time you spoke to a mental health professional? Even the police were being used against her." Sarah realized that every question she answered could be documented and used in court proceedings. Every emotional response could be labeled as evidence of instability. "I'd like to speak to my lawyer before answering any more questions." "That's your right. But Mrs. Montgomery, I'm required to ask, do you have any thoughts of harming yourself or your baby?" The question was designed to trigger a mandatory psychiatric hold if answered wrong. Sarah had to be careful. "No, detective, I'm focused on protecting my children and getting through this difficult time." After Detective Santos left, Sarah's phone started ringing continuously. Reporters from local news stations, having caught wind of the police report and social media drama. Neighbors calling with concern. Emma's school requesting a meeting to discuss the family situation. By noon, Sarah was trending on local Twitter under the hashtag #PregnantSeattleMom. Someone had linked her name to the social media posts, and the internet mob was in full attack mode. "This woman is clearly having a psychotic break. Someone save those children. Prenatal mental health issues are real, but threatening other women isn't okay. Plot twist, what if the husband really is having an affair and she's not crazy? Doesn't matter if he's cheating. Her behavior is unhinged. Get those kids somewhere safe. Sarah sat in her living room, 8 months pregnant and watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. Every cruel comment, every shared post, every online judgment was potential evidence in David's custody case. The court of public opinion had already decided she was an unstable, paranoid woman whose husband was a saint for putting up with her. The school called at 2 p.m. Emma had been crying in class, upset because some older kids had told her that her mommy was crazy and going to jail. The guidance counselor wanted to schedule an emergency meeting with both parents. Sarah drove to Emma's school feeling like a criminal. Other parents stared at her in the parking lot, some with sympathy, but most with the kind of morbid curiosity reserved for public scandals. She was no longer a person. She was a cautionary tale. In the counselor's office, 8-year-old Emma sat between her parents, confused and frightened. David played his role perfectly, the concerned father trying to protect his daughter from her mother's episode. Emma, honey, sometimes when mommies are having babies, they get very tired and confused, David explained gently. Mommy isn't feeling well right now, but we're going to help her feel better. Is mommy sick? Emma asked, looking between her parents with wide and scared eyes. Sarah wanted to scream, to tell Emma that daddy was lying, that mommy wasn't sick but was being hurt by people who were supposed to love her. But she could see the school counselor taking notes, could feel David watching for any sign of inappropriate behavior that could be used against her. Mommy is just going through a hard time, Sarah managed. But I love you very much, and I'm going to be okay. Mrs. Montgomery, the counselor said carefully. We're concerned about Emma's emotional well-being during this difficult period. Some of the other children have been asking questions about things they've heard. We want to make sure Emma feels supported at school. Translation: everyone knows about the scandal, and we're watching to see how it affects your daughter. After the meeting, David drove Emma home while Sarah sat in her car in the school parking lot, sobbing until she couldn't breathe. Other parents walked past her car, some pointing, others looking away in embarrassment. She'd become the crazy pregnant lady, the unstable woman having a public breakdown. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Accept David's offer before it gets worse. A friend. Jessica. Still pulling strings. Still controlling the narrative. That evening, after Emma was in bed, David sat across from Sarah at their kitchen table with revised divorce papers. The offer's changed, he said simply. Given today's developments, my lawyer feels we need to accelerate the timeline and adjust the terms. The new settlement was devastating. Even less money, even less time with the children, and a new clause requiring Sarah to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling before any custody arrangement could be finalized. You're using Emma's confusion against me, Sarah said quietly. I'm protecting Emma from further trauma. Sarah, look what happened today. You're falling apart publicly, and it's affecting our daughter. This has to stop. What has to stop is you and Jessica destroying my life. David's expression hardened. Jessica has nothing to do with this. Your obsession with her is part of your mental health crisis. Sarah, everyone can see what's happening to you. Your own sister called me today asking if you needed to be hospitalized. Sarah's blood ran cold. Maya called you. She's worried. Everyone's worried. The social media posts, the police report, the scene at Emma's school. You're spiraling, and you're taking everyone down with you. But Sarah knew Maya would never have called David without talking to her first. This was another lie, another manipulation designed to isolate her further. I want to see the phone records. Sarah, stop. This paranoid behavior is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't trust anyone anymore. You think everyone's against you. That's not normal. The gaslighting was so complete, so expertly done, that Sarah found herself questioning her own memories. Had Maya really seemed supportive that morning? Had the detective really looked at her with suspicion? Was she becoming paranoid? Or was she finally seeing clearly? Her phone buzzed with another social media notification before she could turn it off completely. Someone had posted a photo of her crying in the school parking lot that afternoon, with the caption, "Local mom's very public breakdown." Prayers for those children? The image had already been shared hundreds of times, each share adding more comments about her mental state, her fitness as a mother, her husband's patience in dealing with such instability. Sarah walked upstairs to Noah's nursery, the room she'd spent months decorating with such hope and excitement, the crib David had assembled, the rocking chair where she'd planned to nurse their son, the mobile with its dancing elephants. All of it would soon belong to someone else, to Jessica's vision of their perfect new family. She sat in the rocking chair, her hands on her belly, feeling Noah moving restlessly as if sensing his mother's distress. "I'm going to fight for you," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I'm going to fight." But as she sat in the darkening nursery, surrounded by reminders of the life she was losing, Sarah faced the terrifying possibility that the fight might already be over. In the court of public opinion, she'd already lost. In the actual court system, with her reputation in ruins and her husband's wealth and connections arrayed against her, what chance did she have for the first time since this nightmare began? Sarah wondered if David and Jessica were right. Maybe she should take whatever settlement they offered and disappear quietly. Maybe that would be better for Emma, better for Noah, better for everyone. Maybe she really was becoming the unstable, paranoid woman they'd painted her to be. But then Noah kicked hard against her ribs, as if reminding her that he was counting on her to be strong. And Sarah remembered something her college psychology professor had said about gaslighting when you start questioning your own sanity. That's often when you're thinking most clearly. She wasn't crazy. She was being systematically destroyed by people who wanted to erase her from their perfect narrative. And she wasn't going to let them. Tomorrow, she would start fighting back. Tonight, she would plan how to reclaim her story before it was too late. 3 weeks later, at 36 weeks pregnant, Sarah woke at 4 a.m. to contractions that felt different from the Braxton Hicks she'd been experiencing. She lay in bed timing them, hoping they would subside, but they grew stronger and more regular. "David," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. "I think I'm in labor." He stirred but didn't fully wake. Over the past weeks, he'd been even more distant, often staying out late for business meetings that Sarah knew were dates with Jessica. He came home smelling like perfume and guilt, barely making eye contact with her. "David, I need to go to the hospital." This time he sat up, immediately alert. "Are you sure it's early?" The contractions are 5 minutes apart and getting stronger. David was already reaching for his phone, but instead of calling their doctor, he was checking his messages. Sarah saw Jessica's name light up his screen before he quickly turned it away. "I'll get dressed and take you to the hospital," he said, but his tone was distracted, reluctant. In the car, between contractions, Sarah tried calling Dr. Martinez's emergency line while David drove in silence. When she couldn't reach the doctor immediately, panic began to set in. "David, something's wrong. The baby's not supposed to come yet. Premature babies do fine at 36 weeks, he said. But he wasn't looking at her. His phone was buzzing constantly with notifications he kept checking at red lights. At the hospital, Sarah was quickly admitted to the labor and delivery unit. The contractions were real, strong, and progressing rapidly. The attending physician, Dr. Kim, examined her and confirmed she was in active labor. "We're going to need to monitor the baby closely due to the early arrival," Dr. Kim explained. "Mrs. Montgomery, is this your first premature birth?" "Yes," Sarah gasped between contractions. "My daughter was full term. Is the baby going to be okay? Babies born at 36 weeks typically do very well, but we'll have the NICU team on standby just in case." Sarah looked around the delivery room, realizing David wasn't there. A nurse confirmed he'd stepped out to make an important phone call and would be back shortly. Her labor progressed quickly. Too quickly for comfort, too quickly for David to return. too quickly for anything except focusing on bringing her son safely into the world. Maya arrived after Sarah's frantic phone call, squeezing her hand through the worst contractions. "Where's David?" Maya asked, looking around the empty room. "I don't know," Sarah sobbed. "He said he'd be right back, but that was an hour ago." At 2:17 p.m., Noah David Montgomery was born weighing 5 pounds, 8 ounces. He was small but healthy, crying lustily as the doctor placed him on Sarah's chest. In that moment, holding her son for the first time, nothing else mattered. Not David's absence, not the divorce proceedings, not the social media scandal, only this perfect little person who depended on her completely. "He's beautiful." "Sarah," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at those lungs on him." Noah had Sarah's dark hair and what looked like David's nose. His tiny fingers wrapped around Sarah's thumb with surprising strength, and she felt the overwhelming rush of protective love that had defined her life since Emma was born. "I'm sorry Daddy wasn't here for your birth, little one," she murmured, "but Mommy's here, and I'm never going to leave you." David finally arrived at 4 p.m., nearly 2 hours after Noah's birth. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and he smelled strongly of unfamiliar perfume. Sarah recognized the scent immediately, the same expensive fragrance that had been clinging to his clothes for months. "I'm so sorry I missed it," he said, barely looking at Sarah as he approached the bed. "There was an emergency at work that I couldn't leave." But his attention was immediately focused on Noah, and for a moment, Sarah saw genuine emotion cross his face. Whatever else David had become, seeing his son seemed to crack through his cold facade. "He's perfect," David whispered, gently touching Noah's tiny hand. "So small, but perfect." For a brief, foolish moment, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Maybe this would change everything. Maybe holding his son would remind David of what really mattered, of the family they'd built together. "He looks like you," Sarah said softly. David looked at her directly for the first time in weeks, and she saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. "Sarah, I—" His phone buzzed loudly in the quiet room. Jessica's name flashed on the screen again. David glanced at it, then back at Sarah, and she watched the moment of vulnerability disappear. "I should take this. It's about the Patterson contract." He stepped into the hallway, leaving Sarah alone with Noah and Maya. Through the partially open door, Sarah could hear fragments of his conversation. "No, everything's fine. Yes, he's healthy. I know this complicates things, but we stick to the plan. Tonight, Jessica, I don't think that's appropriate." "Okay, but just for a few minutes." Maya's face was stone cold with fury. "He's planning to see her tonight while you're recovering from giving birth to his son." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the brief hope crumble into dust. Even Noah's birth couldn't compete with David's obsession with Jessica. Their son was hours old, and David was already prioritizing his mistress over his family. When David returned, he seemed agitated and distracted. "Sarah, I need to go handle some urgent business matters. You'll be here overnight for observation anyway." "It's Saturday evening." "David, what business matters? The Patterson deal is falling apart. I need to meet with the team to salvage it." The lie was so casual, so effortless, that Sarah marveled at how she'd ever believed anything he said. "Will you come back later tonight?" "I'll try, but it might be very late. You should rest. Maya can stay with you." He kissed Noah's forehead gently, gave Sarah a perfunctory peck on the cheek, and was gone, leaving his wife and hours-old son alone in the hospital while he ran to comfort his pregnant mistress. "I can't believe him," Maya said after David left. "Sarah, this is beyond heartless. Who abandons their wife in the hospital after she gives birth?" But Sarah was numb to David's cruelties now. She'd expected this. In a way, his absence was almost easier than his presence would have been, with all its pretense and lies. That night, as Sarah tried to sleep between Noah's feedings, she heard nurses whispering in the hallway. Something about another baby born this week, and what a coincidence, and The fathers have the same last name. Her blood turned to ice. The next morning, Dr. Kim came to check on them with news that shattered what remained of Sarah's world. Mrs. Montgomery, there's something unusual I need to discuss with you. Another patient gave birth yesterday evening, about 6 hours after you did. Jessica Winters. The father listed on her birth certificate is also David Montgomery. I wanted to make sure there wasn't some kind of clerical error. Sarah's vision blurred. No error. That's my husband's business partner. Dr. Kim's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could see the judgment there. What kind of woman stayed married to a man who was having babies with multiple women? I see, well, both babies are healthy, which is what matters most. After Dr. Kim left, Sarah sat holding Noah while her world collapsed around her. David hadn't been at an emergency business meeting last night. He'd been at the hospital across town, holding another woman's hand while she gave birth to his child. 2 babies, born within hours of each other, to the same father. The nurses' gossip made more sense now. In their small medical community, the story was already spreading. The tech millionaire with 2 women giving birth to his children on the same day. It would be the talk of Seattle's medical and social circles within hours. Maya returned that morning with coffee and newspapers, taking one look at Sarah's face and immediately knowing something terrible had happened. What now? Jessica had her baby last night, about 6 hours after Noah was born. David was there with her. Maya set down the coffee so hard it splashed. While you were recovering from childbirth, he was with her while she gave birth. He's listed as the father on her birth certificate. The cruelty was so complete, so deliberately devastating, that Maya just stood there speechless. Even she, who'd seen David's selfishness up close, hadn't imagined he could sink this low. Sarah, this makes the front page of tomorrow's gossip columns. Seattle Tech CEO welcomes 2 children with 2 women on same day. This is going to be a media circus. As if summoned by Maya's words, Sarah's phone started buzzing with calls from local reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the story. The unusual situation, 2 babies born to the same father within hours, was exactly the kind of salacious news that sold papers and drove website clicks. David returned that afternoon looking haggard and defensive. He approached Noah's bassinet but avoided eye contact with Sarah. I heard about Jessica's baby, Sarah said quietly. David's shoulders tensed. Sarah, this is complicated, but you were with her when she gave birth. While I was here alone with our son, she was in distress. Her mother couldn't make it from Portland in time. She needed someone there. She had you. She's had you for 18 months. David finally looked at her, and his expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. Yes, she has. And Sarah, that's not going to change. I tried to do this the easy way, tried to let you adjust gradually, but you've made that impossible. So here's the truth. I love Jessica. I'm going to marry her as soon as our divorce is final. Our children are going to grow up as siblings, whether you like it or not. The honesty was almost refreshing after months of lies and gaslighting. David was done pretending, done managing her feelings, done caring about her pain. What about Emma? What about Noah? They'll adjust. Children are resilient. And honestly, Sarah, they'll probably be better off in a stable home environment than watching you continue this downward spiral. Even now, even after giving birth to his son, David was framing her as the problem. Her downward spiral caused by his systematic destruction of their marriage was being used as evidence that the children needed to be protected from her. A knock on the door interrupted them. A process server entered with legal documents. Sarah Montgomery, you're being served with emergency custody papers. Sarah's hands shook as she read the legal filing. David was seeking immediate temporary custody of both children, citing her mental health crisis and inability to provide stable care as reasons why Emma and Noah needed to be removed from her care. The timing was surgical in its precision. While she was physically weakened from childbirth, emotionally devastated by David's public humiliation, and isolated from support systems, he was using the legal system to take her children away. You planned this, she whispered. The timing of the custody filing, Jessica giving birth the same day, the media attention. You planned all of it. David was already putting on his coat, ready to leave his wife and newborn son again. I plan to protect my children from an unstable situation. The court date is next Friday. I suggest you find a lawyer. After he left, Sarah held Noah close and wept until she had no tears left. In one day, she'd given birth to her son and lost everything else. David had another family now, another child, another woman. The media was painting her as the unstable wife who couldn't handle her husband's success and happiness. Maya stayed overnight, helping with Noah's feedings and fielding the constant phone calls from reporters. Around midnight, she finally spoke the truth they were both thinking. Sarah, he's going to win. The timing of this custody filing, your reputation in ruins, his financial resources versus your complete dependence on him, the system is rigged in his favor. So I should just give up, let him take Emma and Noah. I don't know, but I think you need to prepare for the possibility that fighting this battle might destroy you completely without saving your children. Sarah looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware that his life was being decided by lawyers and judges and social media comments. Emma was at home with David, probably confused about why Mommy was taking so long to come back from the hospital. In a week, a judge would decide whether Sarah was fit to raise her own children. And based on everything that had happened, based on the carefully constructed narrative of her mental instability and David's superior resources, she was likely to lose. But as she held Noah close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, Sarah made a promise that surprised her with its fierce certainty. She wasn't going to let David and Jessica win. She didn't know how yet, but she was going to find a way to fight back. For Noah, for Emma, and for the woman she used to be before they tried to destroy her. The war was far from over. The family courtroom was intimidating in its sterile formality. Sarah sat at a scratched wooden table with her court-appointed attorney, Jennifer Walsh, a overworked public defender who'd had exactly 30 minutes to review Sarah's case before the hearing. Across the aisle, David was flanked by 3 lawyers from Seattle's most prestigious family law firm, their expensive suits and confident demeanor radiating the kind of power that money could buy. Judge Patricia Brennan reviewed the custody filing with the expression of someone who'd seen too many bitter divorces destroy families. She was known for her no-nonsense approach and her prioritization of children's welfare above all else. Mr. Montgomery, you're seeking emergency temporary custody of both minor children based on concerns about their mother's mental health and stability. Please present your evidence. David's lead attorney, Patricia Holmes, stood with practiced confidence. Your Honor, Mrs. Montgomery has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past several months. We have documentation of her paranoid delusions, social media breakdowns, inappropriate confrontations, and inability to maintain stable relationships. Sarah watched in horror as her life was dissected and presented as evidence of her unfitness. The social media posts about her breakdown, photos of her crying in public, police reports about her threatening Jessica, Emma's school counselor's notes about her daughter's declining academic performance and emotional distress. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mrs. Montgomery has been neglecting her parental responsibilities. She forgot to pick up her daughter from school, has been emotionally absent, and her 8-year-old child has been expressing concerns to school officials about her mother's behavior. Jennifer Walsh stood to object. Your Honor, my client has been dealing with the stress of discovering her husband's 18-month affair with her former best friend. Any emotional distress is understandable given the circumstances. Objection sustained. But Mrs. Walsh, your client's emotional state is exactly what we're here to evaluate. Judge Brennan replied. Holmes continued her systematic destruction. Mrs. Montgomery has also exhibited signs of prenatal and postpartum depression, including social isolation, weight gain, crying episodes, and paranoid thinking. She's refused recommended psychological counseling and has been unable to maintain the stable home environment these children need. Each accusation was technically true but stripped of context. Yes, Sarah had been isolated because David had been systematically discouraging her friendships while building his case against her. Yes, she'd been emotional because she'd been discovering that her entire life was a lie. Yes, Emma's grades had declined because her father was planning to destroy her family. Your Honor, Holmes concluded, Mr. Montgomery can provide these children with financial stability, emotional consistency, and a two-parent household with his fiancée, Miss Winters, who has graciously offered to help provide maternal guidance. The mention of Jessica as a potential stepmother made Sarah's blood boil. The woman who'd systematically destroyed her family was now being presented as the stable maternal figure her children needed. When it was Jennifer's turn, she did her best with limited resources and preparation time. Your Honor, Mrs. Montgomery is a devoted mother who has been the primary caregiver for both children throughout their lives. Her recent emotional distress is directly related to discovering her husband's affair and his attempts to manipulate the divorce proceedings. But Jennifer didn't have the documentation, the witnesses, or the resources to counter David's well-prepared case. She couldn't prove the affair's timeline, couldn't demonstrate the coordinated campaign to destroy Sarah's reputation, couldn't show how David had been moving assets to gain advantage in the divorce. Mrs. Montgomery, I'd like to hear from you directly, Judge Brennan said. Can you explain your recent behavior and how you plan to provide stability for your children? Sarah stood on shaking legs, acutely aware that her next words could determine whether she lost her children forever. Your Honor, I've made mistakes during this difficult time, but I've never stopped loving my children or prioritizing their welfare. My husband's affair and the way it was revealed to me was devastating, and I admit I didn't handle it perfectly, but I'm committed to getting whatever help I need to be the best mother possible. Mrs. Montgomery, are you currently receiving psychological counseling? No, Your Honor, not currently. Why not, given the stress you've been experiencing? Sarah hesitated, knowing that any answer could be used against her. If she said she didn't need counseling, she looked like she was in denial. If she said she couldn't afford it, she looked like she was making excuses. I've been focused on caring for my newborn son and managing the immediate crisis, but I'm open to counseling if it would help. Judge Brennan made notes, her expression unreadable. Mr. Montgomery, I understand you're willing to facilitate counseling for your wife. David stood, the picture of reasonable concern. Yes, Your Honor. I've been encouraging Sarah to seek help for months. I'm happy to pay for the best care available. Even his generosity was a weapon. Even offering to help was framed as evidence of his superiority as a parent and provider. Mrs. Montgomery, what's your current living situation? I'm living in the family home with my 8-year-old daughter Emma and my newborn son Noah. And your employment status? I've been a full-time mother and homemaker for the past 8 years. So you're currently financially dependent on your husband. The question hung in the air like a trap. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Brennan reviewed her notes, the silence stretching painfully long. Finally, she looked up with the expression of someone about to deliver difficult news. This is a complex situation involving serious allegations about both parents' fitness. However, the immediate welfare of the children must be my primary concern. Sarah's heart stopped. I'm ordering temporary custody to remain with Mr. Montgomery, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Montgomery pending psychological evaluation and counseling. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Supervised visitation, with her own children, she would become a stranger in their lives, someone who needed to be watched to ensure she didn't harm them. Mrs. Montgomery, you'll have supervised visits with both children for 2 hours, 3 times per week, at the designated Family Services Center. You must begin counseling immediately and submit to psychological evaluation within 30 days. Your Honor, Jennifer stood quickly. What about breastfeeding Mrs. Montgomery's infant son is only 1 week old and exclusively breastfeeding? Judge Brennan paused, clearly not having considered this biological reality. The infant may remain with Mrs. Montgomery during the day for feeding purposes, but overnight custody remains with Mr. Montgomery. Sarah nearly collapsed. Noah would be taken from her every evening, disrupting his sleep schedule and their bonding. But she would be expected to provide breastfeeding services like some kind of biological function, rather than a mother caring for her child. This arrangement will be reviewed in 30 days based on Mrs. Montgomery's progress with counseling and the results of her psychological evaluation. Court is adjourned. As the judge left, Sarah sat in stunned silence while David's legal team packed up their files with the satisfaction of a job well done. David himself approached her table, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and what might have been genuine regret. "Sarah, this is for the best. The children need stability right now, and you need help. Once you get the counseling you need, we can revisit the arrangement." Even now, even after taking her children away, David was framing this as being done for her benefit, as if destroying her family was really an act of love and concern. "When do I get Emma and Noah?" Sarah asked Jennifer, her voice barely audible. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., 2 hours. A social worker will supervise the visit to ensure it goes smoothly." That night, Sarah sat alone in the family home that would soon be sold as part of the divorce settlement. Emma's stuffed animals were gone. David had packed up her things while Sarah was at the custody hearing. Noah's nursery was empty except for the furniture. All his clothes and supplies moved to David's temporary apartment. Her children were sleeping in a strange place, without her, on their first night of court-ordered separation. Emma was probably confused and frightened, wondering why Mommy couldn't come home with them. Noah was probably crying for the comfort of nursing, only to be given a bottle by strangers. Maya came over with Chinese takeout and found Sarah sitting in Noah's empty nursery, staring at the mobile that still played its gentle lullaby. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is unbelievably unfair. I have to see my own children by appointment now. A social worker has to watch me play with Emma and feed Noah to make sure I don't have a breakdown and hurt them somehow. This is temporary. You'll get them back." But Sarah wasn't sure anymore. David's case had been so thorough, so well prepared, so convincing in its portrayal of her as an unstable woman who needed to be managed and contained. The system was designed to prioritize stability and resources, and David had both, while she had neither. "Maya, what if I can't? What if the psychological evaluation finds something wrong with me? What if I really am as unstable as they're making me seem?" "You're not unstable. You're traumatized. There's a difference, and any competent therapist will see that. But would they see a woman who'd lost custody of her children, who'd been publicly humiliated, who was completely financially dependent on the man who'd betrayed her? Would they see her tears and emotional pain as evidence of mental illness rather than normal responses to abnormal cruelty? Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Emma's asking for you. I told her you needed to get better first, but you could see her tomorrow. She's scared, but she'll adjust." Even his updates about their daughter were psychological warfare. He was shaping Emma's understanding of the situation, making her believe that Mommy was sick and needed to get better before she could come home. In Emma's 8-year-old mind, the separation was becoming Sarah's fault rather than the result of David's choices. That night, Sarah barely slept. Every sound made her think Noah was crying for her. Every hour that passed was another hour of bonding she was missing, another night of comfort she couldn't provide. At 6 a.m., her breasts were painful with milk that Noah wasn't there to drink. The physical reminder of her separation from her son was almost unbearable. She pumped milk in the empty nursery, saving it in bottles for Noah's care while she wasn't allowed to be with him. Even this basic maternal function had been turned into a logistical complication rather than an intimate moment of bonding. By 2 p.m., Sarah was at the Family Services Center, waiting in a sterile room with toys that looked like they'd been sanitized to remove any trace of love or comfort. When David arrived with Emma and Noah, her heart broke all over again. Emma ran to her but seemed hesitant, confused by the strange setting and the social worker taking notes in the corner. "Mommy, why can't you come home? Daddy says you're sick, but you look okay." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, choosing her words carefully. Everything she said would be documented and potentially used against her in the next hearing. "Mommy's going through a difficult time, sweetheart, but I'm getting help, and I love you so much. Nothing will ever change that. When can you come home? I don't know yet, but we're going to figure it out." Sarah held Noah close, feeling his small body relax against her as she nursed him. For 2 precious hours, she could pretend they were still a family. But the social worker's presence, the time limit, the artificial setting made even these moments feel tainted. When the visit ended and David took the children away again, Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot and cried until she couldn't breathe. This was her life now. 2 hours, 3 times a week, under supervision, with her own children. Unless she could find a way to fight back and win, Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Claire Rodriguez, her neighbor and a recently divorced teacher, knocked on her door 2 weeks into the supervised visitation arrangement. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've been watching what's happening to you, and I can't stay silent anymore." Claire had been through her own bitter divorce 3 years earlier and recognized the signs of a coordinated campaign to destroy a mother's reputation. "I used to be a private investigator before I became a teacher," Claire explained over coffee in Sarah's eerily quiet kitchen. "I specialized in infidelity cases and asset hiding. What's happening to you isn't random. It's a textbook takedown." Sarah looked at her neighbor with new interest. Claire had always been friendly but private, someone who kept to herself since her divorce. Now she was offering something Sarah desperately needed: expertise. "What do you mean, textbook? David's been planning this for a long time. The social media campaign, the financial restructuring, the timing of the custody filing, it's all been carefully orchestrated. But Sarah, men like David always leave traces. They think they're too smart to get caught." Claire pulled out a laptop and opened several browser windows. "I've been doing some preliminary research on David's business dealings. Did you know Montgomery Tech Solutions restructured its corporate ownership 6 months ago?" Sarah shook her head. David had mentioned corporate changes but framed them as routine business decisions she wouldn't understand. 3 new shell companies were created, all with different ownership structures. It's a classic asset hiding strategy. Your husband has been moving money offshore while making it look like business expansion. The documents Claire showed her were complex, but the pattern was clear. David had been systematically transferring assets out of their joint reach while building his case against her. "There's more. I ran a background check on Jessica Winters. Her previous employment history is interesting." Claire pulled up employment records showing Jessica's career trajectory. Far from being the successful marketing executive she claimed to be, Jessica had a pattern of targeting wealthy married men. She worked for 3 different tech companies in the past 5 years. Each time, she left under circumstances involving relationships with married executives. 2 of those men went through expensive divorces shortly after she left their companies. Sarah stared at the evidence, understanding dawning. She's done this before. She's a professional homewrecker, Sarah. And David wasn't her first millionaire target. The revelation that Jessica was essentially a predator who specialized in destroying marriages for financial gain changed everything. This wasn't a love story gone wrong. It was a calculated business arrangement with Sarah as the target. "Can we prove this?" "I think so. But Sarah, I need to warn you, what I'm proposing isn't exactly legal. To get the evidence we need, we'd have to do some creative investigation." Sarah thought about her supervised visits with Emma and Noah, about the psychological evaluation that could determine her fitness as a mother, about the public humiliation and financial ruin David had orchestrated. What kind of creative investigation? Claire's plan was risky but potentially devastating to David and Jessica's case. She would use her private investigator contacts to trace the financial transfers, document Jessica's pattern of targeting married men, and most importantly, prove that David had been planning the divorce long before Sarah discovered the affair. The key is the timeline. Sarah, If we can prove David was moving assets and planning your destruction before you supposedly became unstable, it shows this whole thing was premeditated. Over the next week, while Sarah attended her court-mandated counseling sessions and endured supervised visits with her children, Claire worked her contacts in the private investigation community. The evidence they uncovered was explosive. David had hired a private investigator 8 months ago, long before Sarah showed any signs of the instability he claimed prompted his concerns. The PI had been following Sarah, documenting her daily routines, photographing her interactions with other people, building a file of evidence for the eventual custody battle. "Look at this," Claire said, showing Sarah hundreds of photos taken without her knowledge. Pictures of her crying in her car, laughing with friends, hugging Emma's teacher, having coffee with old colleagues. All innocent moments that had been documented and cataloged for potential use against her. "He's been building a case against me for months while I was planning our future together." The financial records were even more damning. David had transferred over $2 million to offshore accounts controlled by shell companies. Money from their joint investments, from the sale of properties, from business profits that should have been marital assets. This is financial fraud. Sarah, he's hidden marital assets while claiming poverty to minimize your settlement. But the most devastating evidence involved Jessica's pregnancy timeline. According to her medical records, and don't ask how I got these, Jessica got pregnant 3 months before you did, which means David was already deep into the affair when you two decided to have another baby. Sarah felt sick thinking about the romantic evening when she and David had decided to try for another child. He'd been so loving, so enthusiastic about expanding their family, all while Jessica was already pregnant with his first child. There's more. Jessica's been receiving monthly payments from David for over a year, $50,000 a month, listed as consulting fees for work she never actually performed. The paper trail painted a picture of a man who'd been planning to leave his wife long before she became aware of any problems in their marriage. David had been paying Jessica, impregnating her, moving assets, and building a custody case while Sarah planned playdates and organized family vacations. Claire, this evidence could change everything. But how do we get it admitted in court? That's the tricky part. Some of this was obtained through questionable methods. But if we can get David to admit to even part of it under oath, the rest becomes relevant. They decided to confront David with the evidence privately first, giving him a chance to agree to more reasonable custody and financial arrangements before taking everything to court. Sarah called David and asked him to meet her at their house to discuss the children's welfare. He agreed, probably expecting another opportunity to pressure her into accepting his terms. When David arrived that evening, he found Sarah waiting in the living room with a manila folder full of evidence. "What's this about?" "Sarah, I have dinner plans." With Jessica, no doubt, Sarah no longer cared about his schedule or his feelings. "It's about your offshore accounts, David, and Jessica's employment history, and the private investigator you hired 8 months ago to build a case against me." David's composed expression flickered for just a moment before he recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah opened the folder and laid out bank statements, employment records, and photographs like cards in a poker game where she finally held the winning hand. Cayman Islands Business Holdings, Virgin Islands Investment Trust, Bermuda Corporate Services. Should I go on? David's face went pale as he recognized the account names. Those are legitimate business investments. $2.3 million in marital assets, hidden in shell companies while you cry poverty in divorce court. She pulled out Jessica's employment records next. 3 previous affairs with married executives, 2 previous divorces she helped orchestrate, monthly payments of $50,000 for consulting work she never performed. David sat down heavily, realizing the scope of what Sarah had discovered. "And this," Sarah said, producing photos of herself taken without her knowledge. "Documentation from the private investigator you hired to build a custody case months before I supposedly became unstable." The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and completely devastating to David's carefully constructed narrative. "Sarah, you don't understand the full situation. I understand that you've been planning to destroy me for almost a year while I planned our son's nursery. I understand that Jessica is a professional predator who's done this to other families. And I understand that you've committed financial fraud to hide marital assets. David stood up, beginning to pace the length of their living room. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked genuinely concerned rather than coldly confident. What do you want? Full custody of Emma and Noah, 50% of all marital assets, including the hidden offshore accounts, and a public acknowledgement that I was never mentally unstable, that this whole thing was your orchestrated campaign to steal my children and my life. Sarah, be reasonable. We can work something out. But what you're asking for is impossible. Is it more impossible than taking a mother's children away based on lies? Is it more impossible than framing me for mental illness while you plan my destruction? David's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Sarah could see her name on the screen, could see him torn between his loyalty to his mistress and the reality of his situation. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. Either we resolve this privately, or I take everything to the FBI and the state attorney general. Financial fraud, perjury, conspiracy. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your business practices. After David left, Sarah sat alone in their living room, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. For the first time since discovering the affair, she had real power, evidence that could destroy David's reputation and possibly send him to prison. Evidence that could prove Jessica was a calculating predator rather than an innocent victim. But she also knew that David wouldn't give up easily. Desperate people did desperate things, and a man facing financial ruin and criminal charges might be capable of anything. Sarah double-checked the locks on all the doors and called Claire to let her know about David's deadline. Be careful. Sarah, men like David don't like losing control, and when they realize they're cornered, they can become dangerous. That night, Sarah slept fitfully, jumping at every sound. She'd won this battle, but the war was far from over, and she had a feeling David's next move would be his most devastating yet. The next morning, Sarah woke to find David sitting in her kitchen with coffee and bagels from their favorite bakery, the one they used to visit every Sunday morning when they were happy. Sarah, we need to talk. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. For the first time in months, he looked like the man she'd married rather than the cold stranger he'd become. 24 hours aren't up yet. I know, but I've been thinking all night about what you showed me, about what I've done to our family. Sarah, I've made terrible mistakes. She poured herself coffee, noting that he'd remembered exactly how she liked it. Cream, no sugar. Small gestures that used to mean everything and now felt like manipulation. What kind of mistakes? David ran his hands through his hair, the gesture of vulnerability she'd once found endearing. The affair was wrong. The way I handled the divorce was wrong. Taking the children from you was wrong. I let my feelings for Jessica cloud my judgment about what was best for our family. Sarah sat across from him at the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where Emma had done homework, where they'd planned their future together. The familiar setting made his words feel almost believable. What are you saying, David? I'm saying I want to try again. For Emma, for Noah, for us. We built something beautiful together. Sarah. 12 years of marriage, 2 amazing children, a life that meant something. Maybe we can save it. The words she dreamed of hearing for months hung in the air between them. David was choosing their family over Jessica. He was admitting his mistakes, asking for forgiveness, wanting to rebuild what they'd lost. What about Jessica? Pain flickered across David's face. It's over. I ended it last night. The pregnancy, the affair, all of it. It was madness. I lost sight of what really mattered. And her baby. I'll support the child financially, of course. But Sarah, you and our children are my real family. You always have been. Sarah felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to crumble. This was what she'd wanted. what she'd hoped for through every betrayal and humiliation. David was coming home, choosing her, acknowledging that their marriage was worth fighting for. The custody arrangement, the supervised visits. I'll call my lawyer this morning. We'll withdraw the custody petition, restore your full parental rights immediately. Sarah, I never should have used the children as weapons. They belong with their mother. Tears started flowing down Sarah's cheeks despite her efforts to stay strong. David, you destroyed my reputation. The social media posts, the police reports, everyone thinks I'm mentally unstable. We'll fix it. Together. I'll make public statements. Hire a PR firm. Do whatever it takes to restore your reputation. People will understand that you were reacting normally to an impossible situation. He reached across the table to take her hand, and she didn't pull away. His touch felt familiar, comforting, like coming home after a long, painful journey. What about the money, the offshore accounts, full disclosure, complete financial transparency, 50-50 split of everything, including the assets I tried to hide? Sarah, I want to make this right. It was everything she'd wanted to hear, everything she'd hoped for during the darkest moments of the past few months. David was admitting his mistakes, taking responsibility, choosing their family over his mistress. I need time to think. Of course, but Sarah, I love you. I've always loved you. I just lost my way for a while. After David left, Sarah called Maya to share the shocking development. He wants to reconcile just like that. He says he ended it with Jessica. He wants to fix everything. Custody, money, reputation, all of it. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, this is what you wanted. But be careful. David's shown you who he really is. People don't change overnight. But Sarah wanted to believe in second chances, in the power of love to overcome betrayal, in the possibility that their family could heal from this trauma. She thought about Emma and Noah growing up in an intact home, about the possibility of rebuilding trust and intimacy with the man she'd loved for 12 years. That afternoon, David returned with flowers, white roses, her favorites, and a proposal that took her breath away. I want us to take a family trip, just the four of us. A long weekend at the lake house where we can remember who we used to be, where Emma and Noah can see their parents together and happy. The lake house held some of their best memories. Summer weekends when Emma was little, romantic getaways before the children were born, quiet mornings watching the sunrise over the water. If any place could heal their wounded family, it would be there. David, I want to believe this is real, but how do I know you won't change your mind again? How do I know Jessica won't call and you'll choose her over us? Because I've learned what I almost lost. Sarah, I came so close to destroying the most important thing in my life for something that was never real. Jessica was an illusion, a midlife crisis, a mistake that almost cost me everything that matters. His words felt sincere, backed by genuine emotion rather than the cold calculation she'd grown accustomed to. This was the David she'd fallen in love with, the father who'd cried when Emma took her first steps, the husband who'd held her through her mother's death. Okay, she said finally. One weekend, we'll see how it goes. David's face lit up with genuine joy, and for a moment, Sarah could almost forget the months of lies and betrayal. Maybe love really could conquer all. Maybe their family was strong enough to survive this crisis. They spent the evening planning the trip, deciding on activities Emma would enjoy, discussing how to explain the reconciliation to their daughter. David was attentive, thoughtful, engaged in a way he hadn't been in over a year. When Noah woke for his evening feeding, David sat beside Sarah as she nursed their son, his hand gently stroking the baby's fine hair. I missed so much of his early weeks, David said quietly. I was an idiot. Sarah, a complete idiot. We can't get that time back, but we can make sure you don't miss anything else. That night, for the first time in months, David slept in their bed. He held Sarah carefully, mindful of her still healing body, whispering apologies and promises into her hair. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you, he murmured. To all of you. Sarah allowed herself to relax into his embrace, to feel hope blooming in her chest like spring after a harsh winter. Their family was going to survive. Love was going to win. But as David's breathing evened out in sleep, Sarah's mind raced with questions she was afraid to ask. What had really motivated this sudden change of heart? Why now? Just as she'd gained the evidence to destroy him. And somewhere in Seattle, Jessica was dealing with the aftermath of being abandoned while pregnant with David's child. What would she do with that pain and rage? Sarah pushed the doubts away and focused on the miracle of having her husband back, of their family being whole again. Tomorrow they would start healing. Tomorrow they would begin rebuilding what had been broken. She fell asleep in David's arms, hope and fear warring in her heart, unaware that their reconciliation was about to become the most devastating betrayal yet. The family weekend at the lake house started perfectly. Emma squealed with delight at having both parents together, running between David and Sarah for hugs and attention she'd been deprived of for months. Noah seemed calmer too, as if sensing the reduced tension in his parents. "Mommy, are you and Daddy not fighting anymore?" Emma asked as they walked along the shoreline, collecting smooth stones. "We're working things out, sweetheart," Sarah replied, watching David build an elaborate sandcastle with their daughter. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems, but we love you and Noah more than anything." David looked up from the castle, smiling at Sarah with what seemed like genuine warmth. "That's right, Princess. Family is the most important thing in the world." For 48 hours, they felt like a real family again. David was attentive and affectionate, helping with Noah's care, playing games with Emma, treating Sarah with the tenderness she'd missed desperately. They took walks together, cooked meals together, even made love for the first time since before Noah's birth. "I missed you so much," David whispered afterward, holding Sarah close. "I forgot how right this feels." Sarah allowed herself to believe that their nightmare was finally over. The affair was in the past. Their family was healing, and they could build something even stronger from the ashes of their broken trust. On Sunday evening, as they prepared to return to Seattle, Sarah felt optimistic about their future for the first time in months. David loaded their bags into the car while she gave Noah his final feeding before the drive home. "This was perfect," she told David as they secured the children in their car seats. "Maybe we needed to hit rock bottom to remember what we really have." David kissed her forehead tenderly. "I'll never take this for granted again, Sarah. Never." But as they drove down the winding lake road, Sarah noticed David checking his phone repeatedly. When it buzzed with notifications, his jaw tensed in a way that made her stomach clench with familiar dread. "Everything okay? Just work," he said quickly, but his eyes avoided hers in the rearview mirror. 20 minutes into the drive, David pulled over suddenly, claiming he needed to take an urgent business call. Sarah watched him pace beside the car, his voice low and intense, his body language growing more agitated by the minute. When he returned, his entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the loving husband and father from the weekend. In his place was the cold, calculating man she'd grown to fear. "David, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine." But his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and he drove the rest of the way home in complete silence. That night, after Emma was asleep and Noah was settled in his crib, Sarah confronted David about the phone call. "Who was that today? What changed?" David was at his laptop, typing furiously. "Sarah, I told you it was work. Can you give me some space to handle this crisis?" "What crisis?" He finally looked at her, and the expression on his face made her blood run cold. It was the same look he'd had when she'd first confronted him about the affair. Cornered, angry, and dangerous. "The crisis of my business partner threatening to go to the authorities with false accusations about financial irregularities?" Understanding dawned slowly. "Jessica, she found out about our reconciliation. Jessica is unstable. Sarah, she's not handling our breakup well, and she's making threats that could destroy everything I built. Sarah felt the fragile hope of the weekend crumbling around her. So you're going back to her? I'm not going back to her, but I need to manage this situation carefully. If she goes to the FBI with her lies about offshore accounts and financial fraud, it could ruin me. They're not lies, David. I have the evidence. Evidence obtained illegally by your neighbor. Evidence that would be inadmissible in court and could land you in prison for industrial espionage. The threat was delivered so casually, so matter-of-factly, that Sarah almost missed its significance. David was threatening to have her arrested for uncovering his crimes. You're choosing her again. I'm choosing to protect my family from a vindictive woman who could destroy our future. Sarah, Jessica knows things about my business that could hurt all of us. I need to keep her happy until I can find a permanent solution. The permanent solution sounded ominous, but Sarah was too devastated by the realization that their reconciliation had been a lie to process the implications. The weekend, the apologies, the promises, it was all fake. David's silence was answer enough. You needed to keep me quiet while you figured out how to handle Jessica's threats. You used our children, our family, my desperate hope for reconciliation as a weapon against me. Sarah, you don't understand the complexity of the situation, but she understood perfectly. David had never intended to choose their family over Jessica. He'd used their weekend together to buy time, to neutralize the threat Sarah posed with her evidence, to keep her compliant while he managed his more immediate crisis. The next morning, Sarah woke to find David gone and a note on his pillow. Had to leave early for emergency meetings. We'll call later. Love you. She knew he was with Jessica, probably reassuring her that the reconciliation had been a tactical move rather than a genuine change of heart. Sarah had been played again, manipulated by the man who knew exactly how to exploit her love for their family. By noon, Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. Her phone rang with a call from Detective Santos. Mrs. Montgomery, I need you to come to the station immediately. Jessica Winters has filed additional charges against you. What kind of charges? Assault, harassment, and criminal trespass. She claims you physically attacked her at the lake house yesterday evening. Sarah's world tilted. That's impossible. I was never at the lake house yesterday evening. I was with my family. Ma'am, we have security footage and medical records documenting Ms. Winters' injuries. You need to come in now. The drive to the police station felt surreal. How could Jessica claim Sarah had attacked her when Sarah had been having dinner with her family? How could there be security footage of an event that never happened? At the station, Detective Santos showed Sarah surveillance video that made her stomach drop. The footage, time-stamped from the previous evening, showed a woman who looked remarkably like Sarah confronting Jessica outside her apartment building. The video was grainy, shot from a distance, but the woman's build and hair color were similar enough to be convincing. This isn't me, Sarah said desperately. I was at the lake house with my family. My husband can confirm it. We tried calling your husband, Mrs. Montgomery. He said he couldn't verify your whereabouts yesterday evening because he was handling a business emergency and lost track of your activities. David had abandoned her again. Worse, he'd actively undermined her alibi, leaving her defenseless against Jessica's latest attack. Ms. Winters is 7 months pregnant. Mrs. Montgomery, she required medical treatment for her injuries. This is a serious assault charge against a pregnant woman. Sarah was booked and fingerprinted, the mugshot and processing photos destined to become public records that would further destroy her reputation. As she sat in the holding cell waiting for Maya to post bail, she finally understood the scope of David and Jessica's plan. The reconciliation had been designed to isolate her from Claire's help, to make her lower her guard, to give Jessica time to plan this final devastating attack. While Sarah had been playing happy family, Jessica had been arranging for a body double, staging her own assault, creating evidence that would send Sarah to prison. Maya arrived with a bail bondsman and a grim expression. Sarah, this is bad. The local news has already picked up the story, Pregnant wife attacks husband's mistress is trending on social media. In the car, Maya showed her the news coverage. Photos of Jessica in a hospital bed, her face bruised, her pregnant belly prominent under the white sheets. She looked like an innocent victim, a woman who'd been brutally attacked by a jealous, unstable rival. The comments were vicious. This woman is clearly dangerous. Why does she still have custody of her children? Lock her up before she kills someone. Those poor kids. Their mother is a monster. Finally, the truth comes out about this psycho. Sarah's mugshot appeared alongside photos of Jessica's injuries, creating a narrative of a violent, unstable woman attacking an innocent pregnant victim. The story had everything the media loved: wealth, scandal, pregnancy, violence, and a clear villain. "Sarah, you need to call David immediately. He's the only one who can verify your alibi." But when Sarah called, David's response was devastating. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. My lawyers have advised me to maintain distance from this situation. Given your current legal troubles, I need to protect Emma and Noah. David, you know I was with you. You know I never left the lake house." "Actually, Sarah, I was handling business calls most of the evening. I can't swear to your whereabouts every minute." The betrayal was complete. David was sacrificing her to save himself, abandoning her to Jessica's vindictive lies while protecting his own interests. That night, alone in the house that would soon be taken from her, Sarah faced the possibility that she might go to prison for a crime she didn't commit. Her children would grow up believing their mother was a violent criminal. Her reputation would never recover from this final, devastating blow. But as she sat in Noah's nursery, holding the ultrasound photos that had started this nightmare, Sarah realized something that gave her a spark of hope. Jessica had made a mistake. In her desperation to destroy Sarah, she'd created evidence that could be challenged. Security footage could be analyzed. Medical records could be questioned. Alibis could be verified by sources other than David. Sarah might be down, but she wasn't defeated yet. The war was entering its final phase, and Sarah was determined to survive it. Sarah's salvation came from an unexpected source. The next morning, Claire appeared at her door with a laptop and an expression of grim determination. "Sarah, I've been analyzing the security footage from Jessica's assault claim. There are inconsistencies that could save you." Claire had spent the night working her private investigator contacts, examining every frame of the video that supposedly showed Sarah attacking Jessica. "Look at this," Claire said, pointing to timestamp anomalies on the footage. "The metadata shows this video was edited. Someone spliced together different recordings to create the appearance of an assault that never happened." She pulled up technical analysis showing how the video had been manipulated: shadows that didn't match the timestamp, lighting inconsistencies, pixel distortions around the alleged attacker's figure. "It's a deep fake. Sarah, someone hired professional video editors to create evidence of you attacking Jessica. And I think I know who." Claire had traced the video editing work to a company called Digital Reality Studios, a firm that specialized in creating realistic fake videos for movies and, apparently, for framing innocent women. The work order was paid for by Montgomery Tech Solutions. "Your husband commissioned fake evidence to frame you for assault." The revelation that David had actively participated in framing her for a violent crime was almost too devastating to process. This wasn't just abandonment or betrayal. It was criminal conspiracy designed to send her to prison. There's more. I've been digging into Jessica's medical records from the assault. The injury patterns don't match the attacks shown in the video. Her bruises are consistent with self-inflicted wounds, and the hospital noted several inconsistencies in her story. Sarah stared at the evidence, understanding that she was looking at proof of an elaborate frame job orchestrated by her husband and his mistress. "Why are you helping me? Claire, this could get you in trouble." "Because I've been where you are. Sarah, my ex-husband tried to destroy me too. Just not as elaborately. Women like us have to stick together, or men like David will keep getting away with this." Armed with Claire's evidence, Sarah called the one person she thought might help, Marcus Chen, David's business partner who'd been suspiciously absent during the recent drama. Marcus agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, his expression troubled and guilty. Sarah, I've been wanting to talk to you for weeks. David has been doing things that make me very uncomfortable. What kind of things? Financial irregularities. Money moving through accounts that don't match our business activities. And recently, payments to companies that don't seem to provide any legitimate services. Sarah showed Marcus the evidence Claire had gathered about the fake video and Jessica's staged assault. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered. He's completely lost his mind. Will you testify to what you know? Marcus struggled with the decision, clearly torn between loyalty to his business partner and his conscience. If I testify against David, it destroys our company. Hundreds of employees lose their jobs. But if I don't, he looked at Sarah's desperate expression. Yes, I'll testify. This has gone too far. With Marcus's agreement to cooperate and Claire's technical evidence, Sarah finally had the ammunition to fight back. But she needed more than evidence. She needed the FBI to take David's crimes seriously. The breakthrough came when Claire discovered that Jessica's pattern of targeting wealthy married men crossed state lines, making it a federal case. The FBI's white-collar crime division was very interested in a conspiracy involving interstate fraud, money laundering, and extortion. Special Agent Rebecca Torres met with Sarah in a sterile federal building, reviewing the evidence with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen too many cases of wealthy men destroying innocent lives. Mrs. Montgomery, what you're describing is a RICO case, racketeering, conspiracy, financial fraud. If we can prove your husband and Ms. Winters were working together to defraud multiple victims, we're looking at serious federal prison time. The investigation moved quickly once the FBI got involved. Federal agents raided Montgomery Tech Solutions, seizing computers and financial records. David's offshore accounts were frozen pending investigation. Jessica was arrested on charges of conspiracy and fraud, but David had one final card to play. The morning after Jessica's arrest, Sarah received a call that made her blood run cold. Sarah, it's Emma's school. Your daughter never made it to class this morning. Your husband picked her up for what he said was a family emergency. Sarah's heart stopped. What kind of family emergency? He said there was a death in the family and they needed to leave town immediately. Is everything all right? David had taken Emma, while facing federal charges, while his world collapsed around him. He'd kidnapped their daughter. Sarah immediately called Agent Torres, who put out an Amber Alert and contacted international authorities. David's passport was flagged, his credit cards monitored, his phone tracked. The search for Emma consumed 3 agonizing days. Sarah barely slept, barely ate, tormented by images of her 8-year-old daughter confused and frightened, not understanding why Daddy had taken her away from Mommy. The break came when David tried to use his credit card at a hotel in Vancouver. FBI agents and Canadian authorities surrounded the hotel, finding David and Emma in a suite overlooking the harbor. Emma ran to Sarah when she arrived at the Canadian Federal Building, crying and confused but unharmed. Mommy, Daddy said we were going on an adventure, but I wanted to come home. I missed you so much. David was extradited back to Seattle to face charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. Facing decades in federal prison, he finally agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Jessica had indeed targeted multiple wealthy men, using pregnancy and divorce proceedings to extort money and assets. David had been her most ambitious target, but also her downfall when his obsession with destroying Sarah led to federal crimes that couldn't be ignored. 6 months later, Sarah sat in a courtroom watching David and Jessica receive their sentences. David got 8 years in federal prison. Jessica got 12. Due to her leadership role in the conspiracy and her previous victim's testimony, the judge's words echoed in the silent courtroom. The defendants systematically destroyed families and defrauded victims of millions of dollars. Their actions caused immeasurable trauma to innocent children and spouses. This court's primary concern is ensuring they never have the opportunity to perpetrate such crimes again. After the sentencing, Sarah walked out of the courthouse with Maya and Claire, feeling simultaneously exhausted and liberated. The legal nightmare was over, but the healing would take much longer. Emma had started therapy to process the trauma of her father's actions and the family's dissolution. She struggled with anger and confusion, but was gradually accepting that sometimes people she loved did very bad things. Noah was thriving in Sarah's care, a happy, healthy toddler who would never remember the chaos of his early months. Sarah had been awarded full custody of both children, with David's parental rights suspended pending his release from prison. The financial settlement was more generous than Sarah had dared hope. With the offshore accounts recovered and David's assets liquidated to pay restitution to victims, Sarah received enough money to provide security for her children's future. She used part of the settlement to start a nonprofit organization supporting women going through high-conflict divorces and custody battles. Working with lawyers and counselors, Sarah helped other mothers navigate the system that had nearly destroyed her. "It's about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other women," she explained to a reporter profiling her work. "The system is designed to favor wealth and power over truth and justice. We're trying to level the playing field." A year after David's sentencing, Sarah sat in her new home, a modest but comfortable house in a family-friendly neighborhood, watching Emma teach Noah how to stack blocks. "Mommy, will Daddy ever come home?" Emma asked during one of their regular talks about their family situation. "Daddy made some very serious mistakes and has to stay in prison for a long time to think about what he did. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It just means he can't be part of our daily life anymore." Emma nodded solemnly. At 9 years old, she was already wise beyond her years, shaped by experiences no child should have to endure. "I'm glad we're safe now," Emma said. "And I'm glad Noah won't remember the scary times." Sarah hugged her daughter close, marveling at her resilience and maturity. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. All of us." That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat on her back porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the journey that had transformed her from a naive, trusting wife into a fierce advocate for justice. She thought about the women who'd reached out to her through her nonprofit, mothers fighting similar battles, wives discovering similar betrayals, families torn apart by men who viewed them as obstacles to their happiness, rather than human beings deserving of respect and dignity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Saw the news article about your organization. Proud of you for turning your trauma into purpose. You're changing lives." Sarah smiled, feeling grateful for the friendship that had saved her life and given her strength when she had none left. As she prepared to go inside, Sarah's phone rang one more time. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Sarah, this is Jennifer Walsh, your old court-appointed attorney. I have a client who reminds me of you. Pregnant wife, cheating husband, custody battle. Would you be willing to talk to her? She needs to hear your story." "Of course," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Have her call me tomorrow. And Jennifer, make sure she knows that no matter how hopeless it seems, she can survive this. She can fight back. She can win." After hanging up, Sarah stood in her doorway, looking at her peaceful home. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. Noah's toys were scattered across the living room floor. Photos of their new life together filled the walls. Pictures of birthday parties and playground visits and quiet bedtime stories. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the fairy tale ending she'd dreamed of as a young bride. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was built on truth rather than lies. Sarah had lost a husband, a home, and an illusion of perfect family life. But she'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, that love didn't require sacrifice of self-respect, and that sometimes the most beautiful phoenix rises from the most devastating fire. As she turned off the lights and headed upstairs to check on her sleeping children, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year: complete peace. The war was over, and she had won. Epilogue: the final twist. 2 years later, on a crisp October morning, Sarah was dropping Emma off at school when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from the federal correctional facility where David was serving his sentence. Sarah, don't hang up. Please. David's voice was different, humbler, broken in a way she'd never heard before. What do you want? David, I need to tell you something. About Jessica, about the whole conspiracy. Sarah, there's something the FBI never found. Something I never told them. Sarah's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Jessica wasn't just targeting rich men randomly. She had inside information about their finances, their marriage problems, their vulnerabilities. Someone was feeding her intelligence, helping her choose targets. David's pause stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the call had been disconnected. Your marriage certificate, Sarah, the one from our wedding 12 years ago, it's fake. The words hit her like ice water. What? I was already married when I met you, to a woman named Catherine Winters in Portland, Jessica's sister. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the curb outside Emma's school, the world spinning around her. We were never legally married. Sarah, which means everything. The divorce, the custody battle, the financial settlements. It's all invalid. And it means Emma and Noah are technically illegitimate children with no legal claim to my assets. Why are you telling me this now? Because Jessica's getting out early for good behavior, and because she's coming for the children. The phone went dead, leaving Sarah staring at the device in her trembling hands. She looked up at Emma's school, where her daughter was safely inside learning math and reading and all the normal things children should worry about. She thought about Noah at daycare, playing with blocks and finger paints, innocent and protected. For 2 years, Sarah had believed the nightmare was over. She'd rebuilt her life, found her strength, created a safe haven for her children. But David's call changed everything. If their marriage was invalid, if Jessica was part of a larger conspiracy involving identity fraud and illegal adoption schemes, then the legal protection Sarah had fought so hard to secure might be worthless. And somewhere in the federal system, Jessica Winters was counting down the days until her release, planning her next move in a game Sarah was only beginning to understand. Sarah stood up slowly, her mind already racing through the implications. Emma was legally David's daughter, but if his marriage to Sarah was invalid, what did that mean for custody Noah had been born during what Sarah thought was her marriage? What was his legal status as she walked back to her car? Sarah felt the familiar steel resolve settling over her. She'd survived David's betrayal, Jessica's conspiracy, and the destruction of everything she'd thought was real. She would survive this too, but first, she needed to make some calls. To lawyers, to federal agents, to Claire, and to anyone else who could help her understand exactly what she was facing. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning.